All right. Good afternoon, State Advisory Council members. I'm Morgan Crossman, the Executive Director for Building Bright Futures. And today's State Advisory Council meeting looks a little different than it has in the past year and a half. The focus of today's meeting is really about building connections and relationships between our State Advisory Council members, building connection and then regrounding in the work that we are all here to be doing. And, what's really interesting is that since March 2019, our SAC meetings have been held, actually March 2020, our meetings have been held virtually, and we've seen an explosion in attendance, right? So before, for those of you who are on the board, there would be probably 35 of us meeting in Williston for about 3 hours for these meetings. And now folks are really excited about being engaged and hearing the State Advisory Council talk about all of the really important issues and hearing you all dive into the data and being a part of that process. So we've really seen impressive attendance, and that's not just for State Advisory Council meetings. That's also been for our VCAP committees and our regional councils, such that participation's been up over 200% in the last couple of years, which is both very exciting, but also we know there's limitations around building connection with the board as a team or as a body. So today, even though we are hosting our meeting virtually, we have it set up so our State Advisory Council members are the only ones in the virtual room, but we are still live streaming on YouTube to make sure that we are opening this meeting to the public and making sure that folks are being able to see and hear, and also provide an opportunity for them to follow up with us so that we are complying with public meeting laws as well. So for those of you who are joining us via YouTube, we recognize that we are doing a little bit different of a format for this meeting, and we are not using the chat, at least for today's meeting, and we're testing out this possibility for live streaming. So we do want to hear from you. Let us know how it goes. If you're having any technical difficulties, please reach out to Beth via email. So today's agenda is really including time for our SAC members to be together virtually, to explore the strengths of this body, and excuse me, to really be thinking about our lens for collective accountability. And so I want to take one moment to remind this group of our working agreements as a State Advisory Council. And as we think about creating a space that everyone can engage in, I want you to take 1 minute to review these, and then I will call out the one that I'm most excited about today. So today I want to call out bringing a spirit of experimentation and creativity. And the reason that's the one I'm excited about today is because we're talking about the range of ways that we as a team, as the State Advisory Council, are using policy recommendations and how we're holding each other and ourselves accountable for how we use the tools that we have in our toolkit. So it is our practice to start with a mindful moment. And for the next hour, I'm asking you to be as present as possible. And I think you've heard me say this before. I'm the first person to want to be multitasking and doing all of the things while trying to be focused during a meeting. And I'm going to ask you to not do that today. We really want to use this opportunity for you all to be a collective team, to see yourselves as a team versus being individuals executing a role, and really starting this conversation around shared accountability and how does that relate to our State Advisory Council recommendations. So again, that you all are really seeing yourselves as a powerful team of early childhood leaders that are coming together and being engaged in a meaningful discussion about how we're building a system that supports each and every child and their families. So I want to invite you to turn off your video for 1 moment, to close your eyes, to sit up tall with your feet on the ground and your hands on your thighs. Feel your heels and your toes and the bottoms of your feet. Feel the bottoms of your hands resting on your thighs, and relax your shoulders. Relax your jaw. Breathe in and out. As you breathe in again, take a little bit longer to exhale. Let's inhale one more time and then exhale just a little bit longer. And I want to read one quote before I ask you to rejoin us, which is that shared leadership is more than an ideal. It's a commitment to becoming a real community of leaders with mutual accountability, vision, goals, trust, blame, and rewards. And I want you to bring that into today's session with us. Please rejoin. Thank you. All right. So as we're coming back into this virtual space, I want to make sure that each of you as members of this team hear about each other as members of the SAC. And so in your introduction today, instead of doing roll call, I want you to reflect on this question. In your role or your seat, what part of the early childhood system are you most committed to improving? What do you truly care about? And what are you most committed to improving? And today we're going to start with our private partners, and we're going to put the order of SAC members in the chat so that you can prepare. And I'm not cold calling you, although Chloe, I apologize, you are the first. So we're going to ask Chloe Leary, who is the private co-chair of our board, to start.
Sure. Thanks, Morgan. Hi, everybody. I'm Chloe Leary. I'm the executive director of the Winston Prouty Center down in Brattleboro. And we have an early care and learning program for about 60 kids when we're full. And we also do children's integrated services and financial assistance, resource and referral, all that stuff. So we have that full scope of services, just for some context. And I've been thinking about this, how I think the role that I play, how important it is to bridge from the field to the state and to have the field inform policy. And it's really on my mind, I think, these days as we head into the legislative session and into Build Back Better and all the ways that it's going to be really important to leverage all our resources across the continuum from, down the front lines to, up north, and just really do our best to inform policy and practice and all of our goals, making sure that we have that broad scope. So it's I'm not really answering the question exactly, but just really committed to, I'm going to call it integration, and I mean it in the biggest sense. Like, how do we integrate all of these pieces? Because it's going to take, no one of us can do this, no one silo. So really committed to bringing that all together. In our system.
Thank you. All right, let's go to Christy.
Hi, I'm Christy Swenson. I'm here representing Head Start and running a Head Start program in Central Vermont, in Lamoille, Washington, and Orange counties. I think as I think about this question, I guess really committed to making sure that services are available for those children that are most in need, whether that be, those that need special services, whether it is children with trauma who need support for that, whatever, children who don't have a rich environment, sort of, putting together to make sure that services are available for those kids who need more.
Thank you, Christy. All right, Floor, you're next. Hi, Allie.
Hi, everybody. I forgot to look at the chat to see that I was next. But so I've been trying to reflect on this question, and it's hard to summarize. First, I'm Floor. I represent the Vermont School Boards Association. I do not have a background in education. My field is architecture and interior design, just to put that out there. And I really, I think that what I'm passionate about is really that redesign and prioritization of the best, having the best partnership between public and not just in educational outcomes, but really understanding the needs of all the kids. And I think that this team does a really nice job about that, thinking more creatively and redesigning and prioritizing the common good. And I feel where I'm more passionate is in that, how we help influence and support a policy that helps that be a reality for all the kids from 0 to 21 would be for me.
Thank you, Flor. Lexi, you're next.
Hi, so this is hard to sum up, but the first to come was I feel most committed to supporting local families and being heard and seen and encouraging conscious conversations on these real life issues that we're struggling with and kind of bridging that gap between being the families in the state and the people that are, fighting for us. So.
Thank you, Lexi. So happy to have you here. And Lexi is one of our 2 parent representatives on the board. All right, Becca Webb.
Hi all, I'm Becca Webb. I am the Regional Act 166 Coordinator for the Winooski Valley Superintendents Association, which is quite a mouthful in itself. So when I think about this question, I think kind of 2-part. I both want to make sure that we're working towards the equity and the access piece. But I think also, my goal is really to also carry the voices of the field, and then conversely to share all of the really great stuff that comes out of this organization back in that direction.
Thank you, Becca. All right, Eddie.
Hi, Eddie Gale. I'm with the A.D. Henderson Foundation. I'm the Vermont Program Director, and the foundation is primarily concerned about high quality early care and education. We've got a little over $1 million a year to invest in that sector in Vermont. That is much less than 0.5% of what's actually needed in the sector. And so a lot of what we're focusing on is both professional development as well as public engagement. We're a significant supporter of Let's Grow Kids, and ideally seeing that the public sector is the place that we have to turn to best support early care and education.
Thank you, Eddie. Allie, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. Sorry to miss the beginning. I just have to say I'm from Let's Grow Kids, and it was so good to see Cheryl Wilcox this weekend. I haven't seen Cheryl in years, but she really helped me when the gallons of milk were dropping out of the bottom of my cart. I was in the grocery with my twins who were turning 3 on Sunday. We were preparing for their birthday party, and then there was money falling out of my pocket. She found on the ground. So Cheryl, will you just come around and help me all the time? Please. It was just so great to see you, and it's nice to have this sort of smaller format and be with you all today. So sorry I was late again. I needed Cheryl here to help me be on time. But I would say Let's Grow Kids is really focused on the childcare portion of the ecosystem. That is still quite large. But I'm really committed personally and professionally through this work to basically just make sure that all kids have the access to the very highest quality services they deserve and they need. And in the realm of the 0 to 5 age group, specifically. And I think that's what's so tricky is that some kids are getting what they need right now, but it's just so obvious that so many more kids and families need it. The numbers show it, our lives show it, the anecdote shows it, the logic shows it. So I think it's about sort of saying that we need this high quality system and all children, in 0 to 5, it's just, we're going to where the need is, and the need is kids are not at home in this crucial time anymore. And so, we got to show up for them elsewhere.
Thank you, Allie. Mike, are you in a place where you can respond?
Yeah, just if it starts to break up or something, just cut me off and keep going. I'm listening carefully. Appreciate what everybody had to say. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. So my name is Mike McGrath. I work as the Assistant Executive Director for the Vermont Principal Association, and I'm really interested in well-being for our whole community, and certainly that starts with the foundation of our youngest, and really investing from all sides of things to ensure really strong starts. And for my work in public education, I'm thinking about the the 4 to 8 year olds that I know this group is dedicated to, but of course 0 to 4 as well. And I'm interested in measurements. I think that we set goals around what we measure. So I'm interested in redefining and getting a little more progressive about measuring well-being in a comprehensive way, not just for our kids, but for our whole learning community. So that's what I'm most interested and committed to in this work right now.
Thank you, Mike. Emily.
Hi, Morgan. Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. Sorry I joined late and now I'm logging in from my phone. So if I fall over, that would be why. I am, introducing myself as one of the 2 parent reps. So Lexi and I are hanging out with a parent voice in this group. And my, the thing that sparks my excitement and passion for this work is making sure that parent voice is part of decision-making, in all of the areas of the early childhood system, because it's so hard to inform a service if we don't know how that service lands on the other end. And even more as, the days go by and I settle into, some new work with children and families that builds off of my experience with BBF and parent-child centers, is just really seeing the magnitude of impact of all of the various systems that we have that aren't necessarily completely integrated, or sometimes not at all. And I know that's part of what BBF works toward as well, is creating an integrated and informed system. And so those are the areas that I think about on the daily. All right, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here, Emily. All right, so I'm going to transition to the public partners on the board, starting with Cheryl.
Hi, everyone. Cheryl Wilcox of the Department of Mental Health. I'm the Interagency Planning Director. Allie, one of my least favorite things to do is grocery shop. So you were like the highlight of my day yesterday, you and your kids. That was so fun. And it really has literally been years since we've seen each other in person. So it was so lovely. Chloe, you started and I thought, I should repeat what Chloe says, because it's exactly, they were the thoughts I was having. And I think of, my position sits at the Agency of Human Services. My whole role was created to help coordinate across, we have 6 departments, and beneath many of those are different divisions. And so my role is to try to help us communicate and integrate and kind of pull closer together. And I feel like that is something I remain really committed to, because it's easy to move into our silos and to really think separately. And whenever we come together and figure it out from everyone's perspective and the seats they're sitting in, it just ends up being much better and well thought out. And so places like BBF are just incredible investments of time, so that we can all pull in the same direction. And I really remain committed to that. And it's great to have our smaller group here and see everyone.
Thank you, Cheryl. Renee, are you in a place where you're able to dive in?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Oh, perfect. Okay. I'll try to talk fast. So yes, echo what everyone else said. Oh yeah, introduction. I'm Renee Kelly. I serve as the director of the Vermont Head Start Collaboration Office within the Child Development Division. And I think what really lights my fire about this work, and what I really focus on trying to bring to the table, is this, as Chloe mentioned, kind of a bridge, but really just making sure that the system work that we do is operationalized in a real impactful way for families. I think it's really easy for us to, sit behind computers and do a bunch of strategic planning, and we have all these great lofty goals. But I'm really committed to, measuring what we're doing, the impact that it has, and trying to really make sure that what we're doing is felt, seen, heard, and experienced by families living in communities. So that's me.
Thanks, Renee. And thank you and Mike, who are joining by car. All right, Kate.
Hi, everyone. Kate Rogers, Agency of Education. Totally committed to supporting children's equitable access and participation in universal pre-K programs. And that does not discount all child care and programs who serve children, of course. But a focus at the Agency of Ed is UPK, as well as early childhood special ed and early multi-tiered systems of support. I wholeheartedly agree that we need data to show efficacy, to show what we need to have in place to provide high quality, inclusive pre-K education to each and every child. So totally committed about systems, about data collection to show fidelity to models, and that, of course, how that affects outcomes for all of our children and families. So thank you.
Thank you. And Janet.
Hi all, Janet Kilburn here, Early Child Director at Maternal and Child Health, standing in for Elisa, our Deputy Director, and trying to think about what Elisa might say. I know what I might say, but I think that certainly around early childhood, we would be aligned, and overall really trying to build a tight integrated system and connection between health, maternal child health, and early childhood systems. Certainly our Vermont integration project, that's our new HRSA Early Childhood Comprehensive System grant, is giving us that opportunity with BBF as co-leads on that effort, and elevating family voice in that process to address equity. And so more specifically, I think I'm really focused on building a coordinated information referral system to really address child find in the most holistic sense. So child find for children's development, but also addressing social determinants of health using developmental screening measures to address social emotional wellness, and ideally eventually have a state population data source. So we have really good data on all children, who's screening who, and use that data as a measure of well-being. So for instance, if most kids are on track developmentally and social emotionally, then that is a measure of well-being for our state. So I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. And Amy, I know you just jumped on. I just messaged you what the prompt is, and I'm going to give the regrets and make sure that everybody knows the other reps who are on the board while you think about a response. I don't want you to have to do that right as soon as you're jumping on. But there are a few members of the board who reached out sending their regrets for today. So Paul Dragon from the Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity, and he really serves in a basic needs seat on our board. Wendy Trafton, who serves in the secretary seat for the Agency of Human Services. Both of our representatives, so Representative Jessica Brumstead from House Human Services, who was called into session today. The newest member of our board, who is who is awaiting formal appointment right now, is Representative Sarita Austin from House Education. Kendall Smith, who's the Director of Policy Development and Legislative Affairs from the Governor's Office, who serves as a non-voting member. Dr. Ashley Miller from South Royalton Health Center serves in the pediatric health seat, and Ken Jones from our Agency of Commerce and Community Development. Amy, are you in a place where you're able to respond to the prompt, or would you like me to keep going?
Hi. Sorry, I'm traveling. So I just read the prompt, and for me, and so for people that don't know, Amy Johnson, Director of the Parent Child Center of NCSS, and I represent the Parent Child Center Network at this meeting. For me, the part of the early childhood system that it's difficult for me to answer this because there's a lot of pieces of the system that I want to help to improve, but I think that something that we come up against time and time again is an adequately funded system, so that we're able to have the supports that families need to help them be healthy and well and thriving. And I just don't think that we have that full investment right now. And so we don't have all the supports that families need, and we can't pay folks adequate wages to do the work. So I think that's my answer.
Thank you, Amy.
I'd like to
And-
just say too, Amy, this
Yeah,
is
go
Ally,
ahead,
your
Ally.
picture is so awesome. I don't know when you're traveling, you know, but it's the picture of you and your daughter in the pumpkin patch. And it's just really amazing.
Thank you.
Amy is among many of us who are home in vacation week right now with our small children. So I will likely have Amelie helping facilitate later in the meeting. All right, so I believe we'll be joined by Miranda Gray a little bit later. She got called into an emergency meeting, and I'd love to transition to Cheryl to call for a vote on the October minutes if you're in a place to be able to do that.
All right. I'm disappointed I can't see Amy's picture, and I don't know why, and that would be so fun, especially since we know snow is coming. So the pumpkin patch I'm already missing. So a pretty quick business item. I am looking for a motion to accept the October meeting minutes.
So moved. Sure. Floor.
Thank
Second.
you, Floor. Thank you, Eddie. Second from Eddie. All of those in favor can raise hands, say aye, unmute. Looks like a lot of hands.
Aye.
Anyone up? Aye. Thank you. Great. Anyone opposed? Anyone who needs to abstain? All right. That was fairly simple. So the October meeting minutes have passed. Thanks, Morgan.
Thank you. All right, that was a very small amount of business today, but we're really excited to have you all in the virtual room. And I think it's a really important opportunity for you all to reconnect as a board, as a group. So for those of you who missed the introduction to today's meeting, it's really about coming together, hearing what each of you is individually bringing to the table, what you care about, what your agencies, organizations, and as an individual, what you want to be moving forward in our early childhood system, and allowing you to create strong relationships with each other, to build trust and clarity in your roles. Because I truly believe that we have the opportunity to do great, incredible work together as a state advisory council. And because it's been about 8 months since we brought or onboarded our new slate of SAC members, I do want to provide a little bit of grounding in the purpose and the charge of the SAC, and then we're going to move into discussion. And because I want you to feel very prepared, we're going to post the questions in the chat for you to prepare. That doesn't mean I want you to be thinking about that the entire time that I'm giving you the overview, but I just want to make sure that you are prepared to be involved in this discussion moving forward. So Beth, if you're in a place to be able to put those into the chat, that would be awesome. All right. So again, since it's been about 8 months since we've onboarded our new slate of state advisory council members, and we've just endorsed a brand new slate of recommendations, it's really important to come back to the role of the SAC. What's our collective responsibility? What are we doing as a BBF network, but specifically at this leadership level under Title 33, Chapter 46? So I want to quickly share a screen to re-outline our 5 key charges in Title 33, Chapter 46. The first is to serve as a convener, right? And bring private and public partners together at every layer of our network to coordinate, collaborate, figure out how we're identifying challenges and needs for kids and families, and discussing all of those challenges. What are the barriers? What do we know to be true? And how do we address them? How are we problem solving? And how are we using our strategic plan as our guide? Another key component is monitoring the system. And I heard several of you talk about evidence, data. How are we measuring our impact? And this is a key role and something we've been working on, but still need to perfect over the next year. How are we truly monitoring whether or not each child and family is meeting their optimal potential and well-being, and is our system doing what it needs to support kids and families? And how do we know? The other is responding to fill gaps, right? So this happens at every layer of the network, whether it's within regions, the State Advisory Council, VCAP committees. How are we responding in the moment to meet the needs of kids and families and the early childhood system? Another is empowering families and communities. So how are we providing opportunities for families and communities and individuals with lived experience to lead, to be partners in the work? And then again, that primary role is being the advisor to the governor and the legislature on the well-being of kids prenatal to age 8 and their families, and consistently demonstrating that we as a network are always using evidence and data to inform policy. So going to the folks in the virtual room today and thinking about our SAC membership, I want to remind you all that this board, this public-private partnership was very intentionally created and brought together to inform decision-making as it relates to kids and families. So what I want you to see by showing the public and the private members, at least without names, but just positions and titles, is that across these sectors, we're representing such a range of early childhood leaders and experts. So you're all bringing your own personal and professional expertise, and in some cases, decision-making authority. What you're seeing here is that there are voices from so many sectors, including health and mental health, parents, education, childcare, basic needs, legislative expertise, children's integrated services, commerce, child development, philanthropic partners, funders, advocacy partners, pediatric health, and Head Start. And I think what's really important for this group to remember is that because we have a public and private partnership, it can be such a challenging environment for all of us to navigate because we have a range of roles and responsibilities. But that's why it's even more important for us to be coming together and building strong relationships with each other and being incredibly vulnerable and using our VCAP and data to guide our work at all times. And that's something that our early childhood interagency coordinating team has been prioritizing as well. So what are some of the tools that we as a state advisory council can be using for action as we're thinking about how we use the board, but also fulfill the charges and what's required of us under Title 33, Chapter 46? And we can pull down the screen share for a moment. The first is what we've all committed to, which is evidence and data to inform policy at every single level. So I will not quiz you, but what are the ways that we use evidence and data to inform policy? What are the resources that you have at your disposal at all times? The first is Vermont Early Childhood Needs Assessment that was conducted in 2020. So we have a really robust repository of information that talks about the needs at that point in time for kids and families and how we use it. We also have an annual publication that BVF puts out called The State of Vermont's Children, which will be published in January. And that's where our SAC recs, or the policy recommendations, are published. And most recently, we have a new data platform called vermontkidsdata.org. So if this is not something you've taken a look at yet, please do so. And I'm just going to walk you through a very quick way to think about what is on this website. So vermontkidsdata.org is the perfect place if you have a question about data or something that's happening in early childhood. Do you have a question about data? There's a data dashboard, which includes searchable individual data points across sectors, thinking mental health, basic needs, every area that I touched on earlier. There's some sort of data. And if there isn't a specific indicator you're looking for, it can link you to either publications or the folks that do have data in that particular area. Another section is publications, and that is a robust collection of Vermont-specific and national publications by topic. It's organized to provide a broad overview of each component of our early childhood system, but then diving into what's known about that particular topic. So we, in the course of the last year and a half creating this new data center, got some really great feedback that it's not as helpful to have it by time point or by year. We really need it by topic area and then by year, right? So we're hearing your feedback and adapting based on the needs. There's also a robust policy page that's outlining how the BBF network and the State Advisory Council identify priorities, make recommendations, and then track progress. And overall, this platform is a really unique foundation for all Vermonters and decision makers to understand what evidence and data exists, also what's missing, right? What can we not answer yet about our system, and be able to use that towards building an integrated, well-resourced, data-informed system, which is goal 4 of our VCAP. So that is one body of work and resources and tools that you can be accessing if you're looking for data. But I also want you to see our network as this multi-tiered infrastructure and a tool that can strengthen our system, and think about how we as a system are strengthening communication about the important work happening at each level. So what you're seeing on your screen now is just a very quick reminder of what this network looks like, and a very cute kid, because that is what BBF does at all times. As many pictures of little cute babies and kids as possible. So we have 12 regional councils across the state who are consistently identifying needs, challenges, and barriers for kids and families. And they are coming together and developing strategies to address them within regions. We also have 7 Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan committees that are committed by topic area to addressing and thinking about how we're moving towards our goals outlined in Vermont's Early Childhood Action Plan and monitoring progress. We have this team that's coming together as the 23 governor-appointed State Advisory Council. We also have the Early Childhood Interagency Coordinating Team, which is the public partners on the State Advisory Council. And those partners come together on a monthly basis, and they're charged with taking everything they hear from the network and thinking about how we build a coordinated system at the highest level in state government for kids and families, and then our decision makers. So again, think about all of the different tools that we have in our toolbox and the network we have in which we try to create change. The biggest area that we're going to talk about in depth today is policy recommendations as a tool. So annually, the network's developing policy recommendations with input across every layer of this network infrastructure. And those gatherings seek to identify the gaps, the needs in policy, promote strategic areas of need, and use those priority areas to think about how we're creating strategy for the coming year and creating recommendations that are measurable, that we can move forward. So the example on your screen is one example from the past year, where we started at the base of the network using the early childhood needs assessment to identify that workforce was a challenge. You then saw 6 out of 12 regional councils identify childcare workforce as a priority. We had the Early Learning and Development Committee be instrumental in developing language that they used from the network to put together policy recommendations that aligned with our strategic plan. The State Advisory Council then endorsed those recommendations, and they were printed in the State of Vermont's Children. And then policymakers were able to use those recommendations in order to contribute to how they thought about H-171, which turned into Act 45, which prioritized our childcare workforce. So that's one example of a very broad range of policy recommendations and how we use this network to move work forward. So as we think about the initial section where I mentioned this idea of shared accountability, the goal is that every single year we make policy recommendations that move us towards the vision that we've articulated in the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan, or the VCAP. And I want to read a very quick excerpt from the SAC leadership letter, which was developed in 2020 by our public and private co-chairs, along with myself as the leader of the SAC. And that statement is, with the publishing of the 2020 VCAP, we ask all Vermonters to affirm this vision by creating positive change in the early childhood system. Together, we will implement this strategic plan and hold each other accountable to the goals, objectives, strategies, and outcomes identified, because we believe in it and we're committed to the vision outlined. That still holds true. This is a 5-year strategic plan that we have all committed to. And it's important that as we're thinking about this, we recognize that we've had several transitions in leadership, very big transitions in our board, and we need to continue to recommit and review what's in that strategic plan. So again, that VCAP is the vision and strategy developed for Vermont's early childhood system. It's something that our network is charged with holding and monitoring, and it requires accountability. So it's really about how we as a collective body are holding each other and ourselves accountable for how to do this work well. So in this next section, we're going to talk about our State Advisory Council recommendations, and you now have seen the prompts in the chat bar. I hope you have had a little bit of time to think about what that means in your role. And as we talk about SAC recs, I am going to be taking notes to think about how we strengthen our process, both for how we're developing SAC recs, but also for how we're using them in the next couple of years. So I really am going to be turning to you as the board to have this discussion, and we'll facilitate a little bit, but I really want you to engage with each other and talk about what these recommendations mean. And we're going to be thinking about how we use the recs as a tool to both advise the governor and the legislature, but also how we, in our unique roles, are creating change in the well-being of kids prenatal to age 8. I think that the reason we're bringing this to the board right now is that we've built so much strength in the State Advisory Council, but also in our recommendations over the past 2 years, but we haven't fully maximized our potential in using them and how we use them. And so today's discussion is really a first step for the board to lean in and more concretely outline how we're going to use those recs to inform decision-making at all levels as we move forward. So I'm going to turn it over to each one of you and ask the first question. Where do you see opportunities to use the recommendations to inform decision-making, resource allocation, and policy development? And if you're brave and want to jump in, go ahead.
I'll just do it so no one else takes this one because it's, I think, an obvious one. I just love the obvious examples because they keep making the point. First of all, I love the presentation, Morgan. I really like the sort of like building blocks with the data and evaluation, children and families, like that in summary, just like explains BBF, the value, sort of the linchpin role it can play. And I think you have to continue the drumbeat. We all have to continue the drumbeat so people really understand BBF, the value, the niche that it plays. And so I like examples that also promote that, the one being Build Back Better. If Build Back Better passes the Senate, there's going to be a state plan needed. These policy recommendations can support the details of the state plan, can support lawmakers, can support the administration, in hearing from more voices in a tight time frame on a very specific issue. I mean, I actually just feel so grateful that we are as coordinated and in sync and open dialogue with each other across public, private, regional, state. When something like this comes around, it tests your pipes, you know what I mean? So I have a bunch of other states asking, how are you in Vermont getting ready for the federal dollars? And I'm like, we're actually not really sweating it as much as you all are. I mean, people are panicked, they're happy and they're panicked, but it's sort of like, we have Building Bright Futures, we have trusted partnerships, we have open dialogue. Like we're going to be ready to rock if we see a $400 billion historic investment in kids and families coming from the feds. So I think that the policy recommendations can support that. For example, here where our priorities are, they're not all relevant, but they signal priorities and values from many, many voices and many stakeholders. So it's a hugely important starting point. So it may not be specifically targeting the answer in the way you're looking for. So I don't mean to set the answering tone wrong. If it please lead us back on, Morgan, if you're looking for something a little bit more specific, but it just feels like a really important one and makes the case for us.
I think that's great, Allie. Thank you for jumping in and starting us off. I would love to hear how others feel about the different opportunities to use these recs to inform decision-making. That was a great one.
I can jump in and also say I'm like, oh, I should have gone before Allie, because now I sound more of like a parrot. But I guess what I was thinking is, particularly being new to my division, I use the recs as, where have we been? And now I've gotten to go through the process of we were updating them, just because I feel like there is so much money that is coming into Vermont right now. So it's helped me with how do we use our American Rescue Plan Act funds? Like, what should we be targeting? Because really the answers are there. It's just seeing if there's alignment with how can you use the funds, and has this need been identified, and is it a short term or a long term? And I feel like, as Allie said, we have some infrastructure for the Build Back Better Act now as well. So for me, within my team here at CDD, I think it's a reference point for us to be able to look at, all right, we need to think about new policy. Let's see what we already have written down, and are we in alignment with this? Can we find a way to use these funds this way? Sometimes funding can be tricky, and it's aligned in a very specific, different way. But I think like this is always like a nice area for me to be able to kind of go and check myself to see like, okay, nope, this is an alignment. So I already kind of know what the collective, Vermont folks in the early childhood are thinking.
Thank you, Miranda. Others?
I'll jump in on that if you don't mind, because it struck me somehow to hear, to be looking at the recommendations and to hear you all talking, that it gives us a common language. Sometimes it feels like we're at odds. And so the promise of BVF being a public-private partnership, and how do we use this table to sort of create that alignment, when we do bump up in those areas that maybe there's tension or, not quite sure how to move forward or disagreement, I think the recommendation should be able to help us. I heard so many people talk about data, reminding us of the initiative of BVF. We have so many great data things, and we've been talking about it. So how do we, I think that recommendation in particular could really hopefully help us align our efforts, so we row in the same direction instead of have disparate things happening. So it just struck me that it gives us, again, a common language across perhaps different, even when we have different agendas or different pressures, that might help us be more successful.
I guess I can follow up with that common language that Chloe was saying. I think it also, by knowing that common language, we can help remove obstacles and provide the resources where they're needed, or the effort in policy where it's needed, and all aligned towards, that's sort of what we always think when we're budgeting at this time of the year in schools, right? So how do we help you guys at BVF remove obstacles, but also provide those resources where they're needed?
Morgan, I had a couple of thoughts on this too. One is, I really appreciate the attention that everyone paid to data and I think it's going to be really important. And my point about that is there's a drop off when you get to the pre-K-12 level, where there's an opportunity in the education quality review and education quality standards in pre-K-12 to have some kind of measure of school culture, climate, school well-being, not just for students, but for the whole community. I think that's really important. And it's not there, and it could be. So I think that just connecting those dots, like if we build a really easy measurement and data capture, or there's a drop off on it. Secondly, the workforce issue, I think, is felt across and universally in the state. It's certainly in the pre-K-12 system. Unless you're in it, I'm not sure you have kids in it, I'm not sure people really recognize the extent of which it is. We have schools without school counselors, really short on special educators, short on educators, period. And that's putting a lot of strain on the system. In Act 171, there were incentives to legitimize and strengthen early childhood. And I really think that we need to seriously consider utilizing resources across the educator spectrum to have quality recruitment and quality retention programs, incentives, and more to really build a really strong education system for educators. So I'd like to see some of that policy objectives leveraged in that way, in the way that Act 171 is ready to do.
Thank you, Mike. You broke up a little bit when you were talking about some of the data, but I think that we got the gist of it, and thinking about how we are identifying and measuring outcomes for kids and educators, and thinking about how we're aligning some of that work as we think about using our recommendations, but also how we're meeting our objectives as a state, to think about how we're doing what's best for kids and families.
Morgan, can I pop on and kind of build on Mike's? I think for me, the really great part about the recommendations is that, as Mike said, like, we're not one early childhood system. We're a system that's a combination of all of our localized early childhood systems, right? Like, we're a system that's built upon systems and systems. And I think when we talk, whether I have like my school UPK hat on, or, you know, kind of this community childcare lens, right? When we think about all of the places that we all have passion and energy about, it gets really big. And so for me, what I really am appreciating about these recommendations is it brings us back again to those pieces that others were talking about common language, and not directing our energy, but kind of focusing so that we can motivate behind one thing, or, you know, a selection of things, rather than what we so often do when we have passion, which is, you know, kind of go here and then move here and kind of, you know, spread our energy.
Thank you, Becca. Others who we haven't heard from yet?
This is Kate Rogers. So I think basically the recommendations hold us accountable. And that's what they do. And we have to have the questions within the data to collect the data. So it answers the questions that we have to inform our decisions and ultimate policy change if need be. So I think it's pretty much as simple as that, but it's a huge, huge effort to get to that piece. So it is a comprehensive early childhood system. And as Becca described it, it's systems upon systems upon systems. Well, that's hard to tease out when you have siloed approaches and things like that, but trying to, with everybody having the same goal, right, in the end. Very difficult pathways to get there. But I think, you know, efforts, we're really trying to make things work to support all and each and every child and their family in the state, no matter where we sit in you know, on this committee and our roles within the community and how we move forward. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Hi, Morgan. I'd follow up to Kate. Not only accountable, but this validates the work that we're doing. And I'm under the assumption that every recommendation here has a champion, and someone's going to move it forward. And champions need to be validated so that it's very clear that, yes, this is important, and others are going to be standing behind you and helping to make sure that you get there.
Thank you, Eddie. Others? I will say I'm really excited to hear these reflections from you all, because I have a very long list of exactly how these can be used and how they should be used. And I'm excited to hear them come from the board versus me saying, and this is our role, this is how we should be using them. So it's really great for me to hear you all validate what we know to be true about how we should be using these. Any others? Go ahead, Renee.
Okay, I'm here. So sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I finally landed. I apologize. I'm scarfing down some late lunch. This is great. I'm snapping my fingers, and I'm not looking to put the parent reps on the spot, but I am curious and wondering how SAC recommendations are or aren't meaningful to the folks with lived experience living in communities, right? I think for me, being around BBF a little while, that often has felt like the disconnect is, do these matter for parents and families? First of all, do they understand what we're talking about? Because it is a really complex system. And we're talking macro level work as opposed to, you know, how does this impact my day-to-day? So not looking to put Lexi or Emily on the spot, but I would encourage us to also think how are we making sure that it's relevant for the parents and the families on the ground? Do they understand what this is? I mean, I will say, first off, brevity is not my strong point, but is this in clear, simple, concise language? Do we provide examples of what we mean? What would this look like? I often think that's a powerful question. How would we know? What would it feel like in our day-to-day if we were successful in meeting these outcomes? So maybe just something to put a pin in for later conversation, but how are we using this? How are local councils using it? How are we using it with families to just, again, have that feedback loop to ensure, to hold us accountable, that we're not just all patting each other on the back saying, hey, we've done great work, but that work has had a real tangible impact on kids and families and their day-to-day lived experience.
So it's almost as if Renee saw the facilitator's agenda, which for the record, she did not, which is, right, what are the concrete examples for how to actually use the recommendations across different layers of the network? Who's using them? How should we be using them? The actual tangible components for how they could be used. I've heard you all say they're powerful, we're excited. Here's how I'm thinking about them and why they're so important. But is there a really great example from the SAC recs or from these policy recommendations where you can then talk about an example for how you use them, either personally, in your teams, with your teams, as you're making decisions that you can talk about? And Lexi and Emily, please jump in whenever you feel like you'd like to.
It's tricky because I don't really have any teams that are making decisions. So I can't really speak to that piece, but I did actually unmute right when Renee unmuted, which was great because I feel like she said all the things that I kind of wanted to say, but I wasn't going to say as a parent. So thanks, Renee, for bridging that. I just wanted to talk a little bit about storytelling and the potential for using storytelling in all of the avenues and all of the places where we can leverage our wisdom and our experience and our connections and our networks. And that's something that this meeting is always so great at, is voicing our mission and creating that common language. And I've both enjoyed and been horrified by the ways that stories are used to inform policy. And I think that this group is incredibly well educated in what tokenism looks like and how to avoid that. And I would love to just pick back up on the topic of how to engage with families when things are going well and maybe when things aren't, and using that lived experience and using our connections as channels so that we can send those stories to the places where they can be impactful. And that's where I kind of see BBF's mission and my work aligning, my work as a parent and a community member, as having an opportunity to use my voice, but yet at the same time not speaking for all parents, because that would be impossible. But just knowing that when we hear a story about, someone who's been impacted by the system and has young children, then what do we do with that information? So I just wanted to toss that storytelling piece out there.
So Renee, putting us on the spot, excuse me. I wanted to respond. I feel like I got to be a part of, interviewing families and talking to families for putting together back in 2020. And those families, a lot of those families that I spoke to, I still keep in touch with. And I feel there's a huge disconnect. At least I don't know many families that understand what's going on or know what's going on, or when they look at it and when I, show them the final, the book, they look and they're like, this is great. But, and yes, it's on target, but I don't know if there is like a comforting piece there. So it's like, okay, but then what? So I feel like there's a disconnect with the families and this information too. And I feel like, coming to represent families, I feel like there's a lot of exhausted families right now, feeling not seen or heard and feeling totally disconnected, and not sure what's going on. So I feel grateful for Let's Grow Kids and Building Bright Futures, because as one of those families that feels like, the storytelling, it's been a huge impact for not just our family, but the ones around us. And we've, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, these are the people that are standing up for us and care and want to know our stories and are actually trying to make the difference. So making that connection of bringing more families in to be a part and get involved. And I feel like families are like, oh, they're so exhausted that they don't have time to get even, to do anything. But I feel like making it not so scary and making them feel invited and wanted is, shows support to the families and might be a way to bridge that connection. I hope that kind of answered, but I feel like this is a topic that really is important and yeah, a good topic.
Thank you, Lexi and Emily and Renee for bringing it up. And I'd love to go off script for a second and ask everybody to look at recommendation bucket 3, which is elevate families as decision makers. So to answer Lexi's question, now what? We have a series of recommendations that we as a board, we as a network feel are really strong in thinking about how we are leaning in to empowering families, partnering with families, and doing that in a meaningful way. So how do we do that in the next year? Recommendation 1 is representation and voice matters. Engage families with lived experience to participate in leadership and decision-making across sectors and policy areas. Recommendation 2 is create a culture that invites and supports family engagement and partnership, and provides the necessary training and coaching to attract families who are unfamiliar or are uncomfortable with these current processes, language, and decision-making structures. I'm going to put.
So I think this is an opportunity for us to also think about how we're culturally responsive, because I completely support this work, but as Lexi's saying too, folks are tired and exhausted. And so to do this, we need to be flexible as a system about the ways that, to your point, Emily, so beautiful about storytelling, the way that we're leveraging and engaging those stories in ways that aren't putting it on the backs of parents and families to give more and more and more. And so while I'm so thrilled about the growth of the Families and Communities Committee and the fact that we now have a majority of members and participants who are strictly within a parent or a caregiver role, getting parents to attend meetings is not the only way that we can do it. And in fact, that can be really cumbersome. And so I don't know what the solution is. Like, I do think it's important for organizations to elevate parents and families within their governance structure and their boards and to put them in decision making. But I think we also have to balance that with being respectful that families have a lot going on right now. So I think our job isn't necessarily to create new things or new ways for parents and families to engage, but our job is to really look at our processes, our doors and our windows that are available to families, and make sure that we're doing our part to reduce barriers. So it's not, we want to hear from you, but you need to commit to X amount of meetings and during the middle of the day, but what is it within our own work or our processes and structures that could be barriers for families, and how do we minimize that? Whether it's application processes for services, right? There's a whole range of things, but I just think it's also on us to be really mindful of the time that we're in, and families are exhausted. No, I'm exhausted, and they can't always do more. And so what can we do to really just lower those barriers and try to be as accommodating and flexible as possible?
Thank you, Renee. Other thoughts on recommendation 3 and thinking about how we, even just as a network, think about family partnership, family leadership, and engagement in very out of the box, non-traditional ways?
Because there's a couple of things that come to mind every time we're doing community engagement and trying to support our community and the families, is that they really want to know what we can do for them tomorrow, right? Like there's all of this planning for ahead. Is like, is there some power that we could share? Is there something minimum that we could empower them, and something little that they can do, that we can do tomorrow, right? So I think that helps with the burden that they feel, especially right now through COVID. And I don't know how that particularly translates from what we do every day, but that, like Emily was saying, the storytelling, it's almost like telling the narrative of those recommendations that we're coming up with, but telling a story for them with and allowing them to have some immediate, I don't know how to explain it. We talk about it all the time when we're trying to create inclusive communities. What can we do tomorrow? Because it's so daunting for them.
Morgan, forgive me for not knowing already, but how are we with using different languages on the website and in other communications to families?
It's an area of growth that we need to lean into, is how are we actually getting message out to all of our different stakeholders. So right now, I would say that it's an area of growth that we need to prioritize in the next year. I think that some of our partners in the network and those in the room do this much better than others. And that's something that BBF is thinking about how to do better in this next year.
Thank you.
Yep. Go ahead, Allie.
I just wanted to add that, the theme I hear from a lot of this is like, make it not complicated, make it not scary, right? Make it not just like so many doors in. I think we do all this sort of many doors in as a way to open, channels of communication, but actually it just complicates things so much, it makes it confusing sometimes. So I really appreciate BBF stepping into the space. I like these recommendations. I'm rereading them again now with this conversation as the backdrop. And I just wanted to sort of add from the perspective of something like Let's Grow Kids, right? We're a one-time, time-limited movement that definitely, feeds off of needs, families adding their perspective, all families of all kinds, to make sure that we have this opportunity to change policy so that we're not embedding systemic inequities even accidentally, and we're actually really breaking the cycles and creating a system that actually works for families, and hold ourselves accountable to that through data and, accountability and monitoring of the system and the outcomes that we're promising for kids and families and the economy even, right? So, it's very exciting to work on that, but it's time limited, and we are always reinventing the wheel. I feel like, so the idea that we have this major opportunity that we're just helping to facilitate a Let's Grow Kids to change policy, a forever program of building bright futures that has this culture and has this sort of open door for family voice for whatever the thing might be. Like in our case, a major historic moment for changing childcare policy in the state. Instead of us as a movement having to do all that and create this whole thing for families, that's new and feels different, looks different, has different colors and logos on it, different messengers, building different trust. It would be so much better for BBF to continue to, as you have been, I think, step into this role, identify this role, make it clear, create the trust, create the channel, make it simple. And then the next Let's Grow Kids comes along and it's about something else, or, partnering with any of these sort of movements or policy change campaigns or whatever it might be in the future, or crisis response, like COVID crisis response. And then there's a really easy channel that we continue to sort of build up for this sort of family elevated voice. And it supports lawmakers, it supports administration, it supports families, it just like sort of clarifies it all. So it's not like 1,000 different things. I mean, we would just, have totally partnered entirely probably with the family voice piece, and even our equity, work to bring in different voices from different lived experiences as well, if there was sort of this conduit for the whole ecosystem. So that's what I sort of see happening here. I appreciate it. I think it's still in the beginning of the work, but that's sort of like how, when I read this and hear you all talking, that's the vision that I really subscribe to. And I'm just using the Let's Grow Kids example of, wow, let's just not do it over and over and over again. I think that actually harms what we're trying to do here, because we just overcomplicate it.
Thank you, Allie. One of the things that I'm excited about is that we just, as a state, received HRSA funding for the next 5 years in a co-led grant between the Vermont Department of Health, Maternal and Child Health, and Building Bright Futures to focus on family leadership and how are we doing true, meaningful family engagement, and how are we doing it for the next 5 years, right? How are we committing as an early childhood system to meeting families where they are and to utilizing the BBF Families and Communities Committee to help us build the vision for how we're doing that, right? So we just had our first meeting on Friday with the Vermont Department of Health, with members of our Families and Communities Committee and members of the BBF team, and other stakeholders to say, okay, we know that we've prioritized this. We haven't hit the mark yet, right? We're prioritizing it, but we haven't really gotten the full range of what we want it to be. So what is it going to look like for the next 5 years? How are we going to show commitment? What are the channels? And developing that vision collectively together. So I'm really excited that the SAC as a body is committed to this, is excited to talk about it, and that you're going to be engaged in it for the next 5 years and beyond. But really to say that by 2025, 2026, we will have developed a system that not only meets families' needs and meets goal 1 of the VCAP, which is that all families have a healthy start, or all children have a healthy start, but that we've done an incredible job of partnering with families, of providing leadership opportunities, of meeting them where they are, of building the system that meets their needs. So that is really, really exciting. And I'm really proud of this group for dedicating time today in this meeting to talking about it and calling it out. So recognizing that we only have about 15 minutes left, I want to shift our focus a little bit and be both thinking about all of those tools that we mentioned before, including our state advisory council or policy recommendations for 2021, 2022, alongside our Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan. And the question I want to pose to you all is, how do we balance the need to address what we're hearing right now, which is a current crisis across a range of sectors, the pandemic, mental health crisis, workforce crisis, folks in the field, families, kids, burnout, and crisis on the ground? How do we address those needs and balance the fact that we need to be consistently, as a board and a network, moving towards our vision for the early childhood system? What does that look like for you? How do we do that well? So to simplify the question, how do we as a board adapt to emerging needs and what's happening on the ground and meeting those needs while also holding the broader vision and strategy? It's a big question.
Morgan, I think there's a question around sequence. Like, we can do all of those things at once, but are some of those things sequential? It make more sense to try to do them in some kind of order.
I think when I think about that question, Morgan, in just the simple terms, I don't think either or. I think we have to do both, and to remain hopeful. It is really hard to balance and prioritize, figure out what is urgent and what is important. And I think you do a good job. We as a board, you do a good job about that, but it has to be, we have to do both. There's just no question.
I have, from a parent perspective, I don't have a lot of opportunity to just change the way things work, but I have this sort of concept of putting all of these needs together, right? So we have parents who are underemployed and need jobs but don't have childcare. Well, you know what? Parents make incredible teachers. What if we toss some free tuition and some access to campus childcare in there and create some systems where we can provide adult education opportunities, alleviating more than one bucket at a time? I mean, we have the ability as a coordinated network to create programs and opportunities as a collaborative effort. And so I guess I would just invite us to get really creative right now.
Thank you, Emily.
I love that so much, because I've had this dream since, oh man, for so many years now, of creating I see also like elders in our community as totally an underappreciated resources, and drawing them into, I feel like there's so many great, people in our community and bringing community together. So getting creative, it's one of those things where I feel like we're unique. Vermont is so different when it comes to childcare. We're spread out. So I feel like there's some different things that we need to look at. I love the idea of, especially when you're traveling 45 minutes to your closest, Head Start or childcare provider, opposite direction from where work is, you can't find anything. One of those things where if there was a way to even bring somebody in the home or into, have that as an option, to be able to, until you even get in, because it's like, as a parent waiting on childcare, to be able to go back to work without trying to balance it with a toddler at home. Anybody working from home with their kids, my heart just goes out to, because it's hilarious. It's kind of disastrous in a way. I don't know if anybody else goes through that. You have a mess just to try and get a meeting done. It's so stressful. So to have, some sort of, creative way where we can have support for families in the way that we need it. I could go on about that. I have so many ideas for like multi-generational, care and support.
Thank you, Lexi. And I promise I did not just wake my daughter up from nap to speak to your point about how challenging it is to be a working parent, but I have invited Beth back in to help me facilitate the rest.
Lexi, I love that you mentioned that and you do. I've heard you great ideas, and to Emily's point as well about how to stop separating these issues, right? But really to say this is the whole picture. And so I wonder if others have input around kind of how do we prioritize that to be able to better represent the experiences of children and families as a whole instead of as separate issues.
I want to jump in here because I just keep thinking about what Allie said. That was so beautiful, Allie, about, kind of fast forwarding or having this like simple lane that we elevate family voice and equity work through BBF, because there's so much going on and so many different levels, so many organizations and programs that prioritize that work this past year, and really having this central policy body to pull together and guide our efforts and message it to policymakers, to the field, as well as figuring out how to message it to families, right? And get more engagement. I feel like that idea is really what BBF is all about, and using these policy recs to help us keep abreast of what all these different things are doing, right? But then pulling them together in some sort of a frame to make it a simple communication, a simple and effective way to advocate for change. Because we lose people when our system complexity becomes the message. We all understand, at least sometimes we understand it, right? But really looking to BBF and the VCAP and the policy agenda to be our framework, so that we don't get pulled in a bunch of different directions.
Thanks, Janet. Renee, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I completely agree with this thread of conversation. I just wanted to toss out a quick example. I've recently had some conversations with Erin Olikin, who heads up the Reach Up TANF program, and all of the 2-gen work that they're doing within that program to try to make sure that it's responsive to families. And I had the opportunity to sit in on a regional meeting and hear about some great work happening in Connecticut, offering up like a parent council at the statewide level. And so my message to her was, hey, it seems like you all within a Reach Up TANF world are also struggling with this. How do we engage families, right? And so again, how do we not just, as you said, Allie, keep recreating wheels, but how do we leverage networks that already exist and build off of them? And sure, not every family that we touch within early childhood is a participant or connected with Reach Up and TANF, but I would imagine it's like a nesting bucket. And there are certainly a good amount of folks within our networks who have that experience. So I just wanted to share, like, I agree with this conversation and share a concrete example of where there are other entities and bodies in the state who are looking for this family engagement piece. And BBF has done so well in these last few years of building it up. So how do we leverage those efforts and really unite together as opposed to recreating these wheels?
Great, especially in light of, having funding and grant focus to be able to support the execution of these goals. It's perfect. It's amazing. As we finish up here today, is there anyone who is on the call we haven't heard from? I just want to create space as we start to wrap things up. It's been great to listen in and for you all to have some virtual FaceTime together. How was this experience for you in terms of our tech trial with only SAC members? Any reflections about this process? If this was helpful, or if you miss our 60 friends who often are listening in, which we so appreciate hearing their voice as well. Thanks, Allie. Any other reflections? Okay. We don't imagine using this all the time, but there are times where it's helpful to be able to build relationships and connections. So anyway, whether it's feedback now or later by email, it's appreciated as well. For folks who are watching via YouTube, would love your feedback about how it went on your end. Great. All right. I recognize that not everyone is on the chat, but we're getting some written feedback, which is always helpful, recognizing people engage in different ways. So as someone who is listening in and serving as kind of tech operator for the meeting, it was nice to be able to listen and appreciate that you were able to tune in and try to set those other tasks aside to really focus and encourage you, if there are people on this call on the SAC that you do not normally connect with, to reach out, that it is our responsibility to be able to build those connections so that we can pick up the phone and make that call, to be able to build integration, as well as to build this piece around elevating family voice. That to do that well takes a lot of coordination and preparation, both on the receiving committee or kind of policymaker side, as well to be able to effectively welcome families to do that. So given that was a focus of our conversation, that is important. Morgan, I don't know if you're able to, if you want to chime in as we finish up.
I will try. Thank you for all being here today and for doing it with help and by yourself, right? In the context of your homes and your cars. I think it's been a really important discussion as we think about the board being able to come together and have important conversations, right? As a team, as a unit. And so and again, I really want to make sure that folks are feeling like they are a part of a team doing this work together, plus that you have the support of over 450 people that are coming together as a network through BBF to support you in executing this work as well. So I really appreciate you being here. I hope that you are taking some time off to spend with loved ones this week, and we will see you next month, not for the State Advisory Council meeting, but invite you all to attend the Regional Council Summit and hear about the incredible work that our regional councils are tackling right now. So we'll follow up.